All right, we're recording now. I've shared the agenda on the chat screen. I'm just writing down all the names of people who are attending today. So in the agenda, in the Google Doc that I've shared, I'm going to share it again for people who just joined. So I want to start off by providing an update that Nick Turner from Amazon gave me. He couldn't attend the meeting today, so he gave me this update. They're starting work on AWS CCM, and they've created a meeting for this Friday where they're going to discuss about how they're going to structure the repository. If anyone's interested in joining that meeting to understand how AWS is going to set up this CCM repository, here's the link to the meeting and the details. I've shared on the chat.
Is anyone planning on going to that meeting?
I am.
Okay. Can you make sure that when they're talking about setting that up, that you point them to the KEP pull request I have in progress? Just because if there are things that they want to do or they want to set up, I think it would be good for them to comment on the on that document so that kind of the I guess the straw man that we're setting up they can respond to, and we can benefit from kind of their insight and thoughts onto this.
I agree. I was already going to do that. Can you share a link to your KEP pull request?
Yeah, I need to rebase it. And I need to respond to some comments on it. I will.
I mean, the link is still going to remain the same, right?
Yeah, the link will stay the same.
Okay. So yeah, if you can share the link, that would be great.
Yeah,
thank you.
And I'll put it into the meeting notes too.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll take this link and I'm just going to comment on the issue. The second thing I wanted to talk about was if there's anything else people want to discuss about this AWS meeting, please go ahead. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next issue. Okay, moving on. So there's an AWS CCM bug where the IP addresses are being reported wrongly. If there is, so I know Anoop, the issue that you were working on last week to deprecate the external ID is completed now.
Yeah.
So if you have the cycles, could you look into the issue 61921? Let me share a link to it in the chat. So we need someone to look into this issue and understand what's going on.
Oh, okay. But apparently I have been asked not to much focus on Kubernetes anymore by my team. So I'm not sure how much time I will be able to give. But yeah, let me go over this.
Okay. If you look at what the issue says, apparently there are two problems. One is multiple IP addresses are being reported for a node, some of which don't exist for that node. The other issue is even when the right amount of IP addresses are reported, some of them seem to be wrong. And this seems to, they've only reported this for Amazon.
Oh.
If anyone has encountered this issue, please speak up so we'll know if you've seen this before. If anyone has seen this issue with a different cloud provider, it's probably a good data point too.
Okay, I will look at this issue if it is something.
It seems like it's from just a quick glance at the CR. It seems like one of the components might be just trying to read metadata and using that, and then the other one is trying to get all the data by the node name, and so that might be a difference in the IP, or it could be AWS, but that seems unlikely.
So can you repeat that last part? I didn't hear that.
I was saying it could be a bug on AWS DNS, but I said it's unlikely.
Yeah, that's unlikely. Yeah, I hope not. Anyways, so unless we investigate it, we'll just be guessing. So assuming Anup has the time, he's going to look at it and report back to us. Andrew, do you want to provide us an update on what's going on with the SIG-ARC meeting?
Yeah, so I gave an update last week, but I don't think Jago was there. So pretty much we asked SIG-ARC if they would temporarily sponsor repos for new cloud providers because there needs to be a SIG that owns new code, and we're not a SIG. And they said no. So what we think is best going forward is to just push for our working group to be a SIG. That way, for new cloud providers like DigitalOcean or Alibaba Cloud or VMware, we can kind of figure out some way to have those repos for them. But I don't know, like it's still ambiguous. Like it's still unclear if SIG Cloud will be approved and if we really want to have these repos for all the cloud providers, because it seems like, well, my main reasoning for the cloud provider repos was for visibility and also for the test infrastructure. But Dim's updated me last week saying that most of the test infrastructure you can do it for repos that aren't part of the Kubernetes org. So it's still unclear. But I think because the process to promote things to a SIG takes a long time. I think it's best if we just push forward, and then if we get rejected later, then we do. But at least we have the ball rolling.
Yeah. So I can see a couple paths on this one. Either we can kind of articulate the in-org cloud provider repos as an incremental step towards moving them a final step out of the Kubernetes org and into their own company-specific organizations and solve the disparity that way. Or continue along the path that you're talking about, which is to promote this group to a SIG. I think that conversation is going to hinge on whether there is common code that the SIG would own that's not unique to any cloud provider, rather than what is the code that those cloud providers want to provide to use the tooling and organizational structure of Kubernetes org.
Right.
There's also, Caleb brings up the legal hurdles are likely more complicated than any of the technical ones that we care about in this group mostly. So we should be aware of those and try and pull in folks early on. But I mean, what's the general sentiment here? I think the reason the code that exists there today is in Kubernetes repository and org is just historical. I don't think we should think of anything as an immovable object. So I would love to start with what is the most reasonable outcome, and then we can chip away at how to get there.
So I'm sorry, did I hear that we want to move the repositories out of the Kubernetes org back into the organization's own GitHub orgs?
I'm saying I can see two paths. Like, I think the goal that we've been working towards here is to work towards a world where there aren't two classes of cloud providers, those that just happen to show up before some arbitrary date and those that showed up afterward. Yeah. Because there's an implicit understanding by users that those that are within the Kubernetes repository and organization are somehow more supported than those that are not. This is my assumption. I think we've talked about that before. So the ways that I can see to close that disparity are to create a process and criteria by which other cloud providers become part of the Kubernetes organization and other repositories, or to clearly state the goal that the Kubernetes org-owned repositories that are company cloud provider specific is an incremental step towards those being in their own organizations. And I don't know that I have strong feelings yet without doing some more exploration, but I'm just illuminating that there may be another path other than having all of this cloud providers in the Kubernetes org. And I suspect the reason SIG-ARC said no is because the trending direction is to try and have the Kubernetes org own less code generally that isn't core to the kernel-y parts of Kubernetes. And I expect that trend to continue. So this is we have to make a strong case that there's a special reason for this code to live there. But I'll put some more thought into it too if others have thought about this already.
Yeah, I have thoughts about this, and largely from the point of view of what the end user experience is. There's Kubernetes doesn't work very well if it's not on a cloud. It can. There are bare metal options, but there are many things that are geared towards clouds being there. So maintaining a set of providers that we know are maintained by the experts on that and are documented, and have having those discoverable and documentation be publishable to the Kubernetes.io, the documentation website there, with a set of people who are maintaining that and assuring that, I think has value for the community in the long term. Now, if the people working on that were to stop working on that and there wasn't a consistent effort to do that, then I think it would be a stronger case to say that nobody should nobody should be part of that organization, because one of the things that I would like to see out of this working group and an eventual SIG is kind of a body that maintains a set of standards for if you offer a cloud provider and it's through SIG Cloud, you have a baseline set of assurances of the documentation and the quality and the maintenance of that. So that's the strongest argument I can see for keeping it within the org.
Yeah, that was going to be my question too. Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe conflating a few big ideas, and I have seen a lot of conversations in the past on mailing lists about the need for a place where multiple cloud providers can come together and discuss evolution of behavior and consistency. That's somewhat of a larger charter than this project has been focused on, but I think it's impossible to have the conversation about how this working group becomes a SIG with a multi-year charter without getting into those other conversations. And I've seen arguments for and against, and the same people don't need yet another weekly meeting to sync up. I actually don't. I'm not convinced it's the same people or that there would be overlap. So I would be in favor of that larger charter as a SIG. We have conversations about node deletion behavior and what does it mean, like suspend versus like those kinds of conversations have already overflowed the initial charter or intention of this working group, and there are folks who have strong opinions who don't want to be surprised later. It would be good to have a forum for those kinds of conversations. And so I think sometime in the next couple months we get to the point where that's certainly appropriate. On the conversation of code ownership, there's also the sub-project concept. I don't know what SIG, the cloud provider, would be a sub-project of, so I don't see how that fits, but there are other mechanisms too. And Caleb puts a lot of thought into this too, and he's been writing some notes. He may be able to help too.
I think the sub-project would be a mechanism for having a bunch of code that is not shared in functionality, so that each of the cloud provider repositories would be a sub-project of possible SIG cloud.
Flip it. That makes sense to me.
And then you still have all the benefits of the owner structure being tightly coupled to the code, and you've got the other benefits of being a SIG.
Okay. What I think would be great for this meeting is if we can just have a concrete list of things that we can do, because I mean, I'm more than happy to put in the work to push this forward. I just don't know. It seems like there's a lot of different people to talk to and different things to do. and I just don't really know where to start. Like, should I just like, so we talked about last week writing a proposal, but should this proposal be like, what exactly do we want to push in this proposal?
Well, it seems like there's a bunch of other legwork to be done with talking to the other existing provider-specific SIGs.
Right.
Make sure they're on board with getting folded into a larger SIG cloud. That work, I think, could begin without a proposal.
Okay.
Are you going to KubeCon, Andrew?
Yes, I will be.
Do you want to try? Do we have some time set aside for this working group? Maybe we can decide some of these things. Is there more?
Nothing's been set up yet, but we
we've
can definitely set it up.
Cool.
Yeah, I did request time at the contributor summit for working on some of this too. So if anyone's at the contributor summit, I requested a session on this.
Sweet.
I think that's a good idea.
Because I think, at least for me personally, I'm low on bandwidth until KubeCon.
Same.
Maybe we could at least come up with a shared doc to enumerate the high-level options, and folks who think of other ones we didn't think of can add to that. Folks can tell us why they don't work, those kinds of things, just as a bit of pre-works. It feels like everyone's busy and we only have a short time to talk about this weekly, but these are pretty big questions and there are a lot of interested parties. So I think if we can do a little pre-work in a doc before KubeCon, and those that are there can try to get some dedicated face-to-face time there, then perhaps the week or two after that we can have a real proposal that's not coming out of left field for architecture too.
Okay, that sounds good to me. So yeah, okay. I'll just I'll start a doc and just start putting a bunch of notes there, and then every week we can kind of quickly scan over it and figure out like what we're missing and what we should add, and then we'll try to schedule something for KubeCon, and then we'll go from there.
That sounds great. Thanks for continuing to push on this. It is important. Fully support it.
Yep, my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. The next thing on the agenda is there was a bug, Andrew, you reported about onboarding new cloud providers, where previously, like for cloud providers that didn't exist before, and when you're upgrading Kubernetes from a non-cloud provider Kubernetes setup to one with a cloud provider, you said you're going to look into it more and get back to us.
Yeah, it seems like it doesn't seem like a lot of people will run into that issue. I haven't been able to it was more of like a theoretical bug that will happen, but I haven't run into any clusters, or I haven't been able to kind of break a cluster on purpose to try to reproduce that bug. So for now, I'm just gonna kind of punt it. But if it comes up in the future, we can address it. But I think most users, I don't think it'll be a problem, because those new cloud providers will probably be spun up. Like whatever cluster is using the Cloud Control Manager will probably be a new cluster. So, yeah.
Well, while we're on this topic a little bit too, Chris Negus has joined us, and there was a pull request for him to add documentation on how to set up Kubernetes on Fedora systems, and he had been pointed to the cloud provider working group, and so there's also a question of I think Chris has a question of how possible, Fedora really isn't a provider, but it's a platform, and does this somehow fit in with the mandate of this group?
It seems more like cluster lifecycle is where you want to be, especially with the cluster API. That's one of the bits you twiddle there about what operating system is going to be deployed.
So is documentation for different platforms going to be split out the way you're splitting out cloud documentation? Is that the long-term plan?
I don't believe so, but you would check with SIGDocs there about if they have any plans on reorganizing. They are making a big push for user journeys. So that actually seems like it would fit in pretty well with their work, since the operating system is a key part of your deploying the cluster.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to do anything, grandiose here. There were just two procedures for how to set up Kubernetes on Fedora that I just wanted. They were out of date, so I just fixed them. So it kind of brought up the bigger issue. But so you're feeling as though for platforms, it's not going to be it's not something that's going to be spun out the way you're spinning out the cloud stuff then.
I don't think there's any plan to do that, and it would have to come back. It would have to dovetail again back in cluster lifecycle, since they have to resolve that for their work.
Okay.
Yeah, conceptually there are two kind of phases. One is the setup of the cluster that often requires interaction with lower level infrastructure that is cloud specific, network and load balancers and volumes and VMs that the cluster is deployed to. And that is typically the domain of cluster lifecycle. The work that we're doing here is essentially attempting to create implementations for different providers that are behind a common abstraction, so that the end user, once this is running, shouldn't fundamentally care what cloud provider it's running on. And that's one of the core benefits that users get from Kubernetes, is that their workloads are portable across these providers once that's in place.
Sure.
And like Jacob was saying about the two phases, a lot of the work done with the infrastructure here is imperative in nature, and a lot of the work in the cluster lifecycle group is declarative in nature.
Okay. So I guess I don't need to be here. It sounds like you're doing great work, and probably not along the lines of what I'm looking at then.
Yeah, sorry about the false alarm there, Chris.
Hey, no problem. That's fine. I really just need to figure out where this fits in, because I do want to do more contributions upstream, but this thing is all moving so fast. It's hard to know exactly how to do that, to tell the truth. So I'm trying to, while this thing is running, I'm trying to find out how I can jump on and run along with it. So.
I think we just described the experience of every contributor to Kubernetes. So that
And definitely reach out to Josh Burkis, since he's a community manager for Project Atomic.
Got it. Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks. I'll cut out then. Thanks very much. Appreciate the help. Yeah. Bye-bye.
So the next thing on the agenda, thank you, Chris. And the next thing on the agenda is, I know Dims and Chris Hodge have been running end-to-end tests. You want to provide an update on that, Chris?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So over the last week, the OpenStack cloud provider team has successfully run end-to-end tests, taking the Minikube approach. So they're standing at Minikube inside of, I think, Vex Host Cloud, and running end-to-end performance tests on that. So I can try to dig up that link, but maybe I'll just drop it into the document a little bit later once the meeting's over. Showing how we set up those tests. We're looking to have those tests integrated into TestGrid right now, but we've hit a stumbling block where we need to be able to publish those test results to a GCS bucket. But right now, for TestGrid results, only Google employees are being allowed access to those GCS buckets. And so we're trying to work with Google and trying to work with the CNCF to see if we can also get access. So if anybody within Google has any pointers on how we can work with SIG testing and the CNCF to enable this, that would be really helpful. And not just for us, but for the cloud providers in general.
Yeah, it's actually pretty straightforward. You really just file a ticket with the test infra team, and they will make you a bucket and give you permissions to push to it. So if you want to follow up with me, I can follow up with our test infra team to do that for you.
Okay.
But there's a bunch of other providers that, not cloud providers, but Canonical, CoreOS, all published at one time to TestGrid. Canonical still does.
Yeah. If you could reach out to me I'm Hodgepodge on Slack or chris@openstack.org. That would be awesome.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Yep.
And I'll provide the link in the Google Doc for exactly how we're setting up those tests so that other providers can take a look at it.
Yeah, thank you for that.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that'd be great. I was trying to look at some of the work Dims did to do it for DigitalOcean, and then I got stuck on trying to figure out like where do I put tokens and stuff. So yeah, it'd be great if there was just like a document I could follow instead of having to chase around PRs.
Okay, cool. I'll circle up with Dims and see what we can get.
And that document that Ben the Elder published about publishing conformance tests to test grid should work even if you're not using Sonobui to run the tests, like the typical conformance test suite. It's really just about the JUnit XML format, and the logs need to be pushed to that S3 compatible bucket, essentially. And so you can use kubetest, for example, to run those without running Sonobui. And I will try and find that link again too, because it does discuss the credentials and what's required there.
Okay, so to be clear, it could be any S3 compatible object storage?
That is my understanding. That is either now or planned, but yes, my understanding is that as long as URL is globally accessible and is S3 compatible, that TestGrid can pull results from that. So
that makes my life easier. Awesome.
Right, that was the intention, was to make lives easier.
Okay, so the last issue that we'd planned for is, I know Chris Hodge again is working on a set of minimum requirements for the documentation of CCMs that cloud providers have to follow. Do you have an update on that?
Yeah. So so aside from that, the KEP pull request on minimum requirements, I don't have any other documentation on that as of yet. I did meet with, I attended the SIGDocs meeting earlier last week, and then I set up a special meeting with the SIGDocs team on Friday of last week to talk about how to, what the path going forward for removing the current documentation from the website repository, and then generating new documentation based off of the providers under this workings group's kind of purview. I think they agreed that at a minimum we would want everybody to produce a getting started guide, which is just how to use this thing, but then also a document that outlines a configuration guide, which is all of the options that are available and how they work. The timeline is going to be to early in the 1.11 cycle to announce the removal of the removal of the current cloud provider documentation. Right now, I think it's only AWS and OpenStack that actually produces those, and and also work on the tooling that will the structure and the tooling for pulling the documents from the cloud provider repositories. And so they have a link to that pull request, and they're going to be making comments on it. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to catch up at the KubeCon and nail a lot of these things down. And so, we will, as we move forward on that, I'll try to keep the group appraised of what's happening and try to get people, scheduled in with sessions that, any ad hoc sessions we put together for this. I don't know if there are any questions about that.
No, awesome, thanks. Also, thanks for sharing the timeline. Okay, this sounds good. I think one of the things we should do is we should kind of set up the meeting for when everyone's going to meet at KubeCon. I won't be there, but I can help set up the meeting. Other than that, we've run out of time, but I know a few new people have joined us today. Travis and David, I believe. And if you wanted to discuss something or bring up something, this is a good time to quickly bring it up.
Hey, Sid, thanks. I don't have anything specific that I wanted to discuss, but I'm looking at this from an angle of being involved in the future for the VMware cloud provider. So it's more just making sure that we're aware of what's going on. And like I said, this is the first time I've attended. So I'm really just kind of coming up to speed, but that's my interest in it, is for the VMware cloud provider. So making sure I know everything that's going on there.
Awesome. Travis, there is, other than this meeting, we also have a Slack channel. Are you already aware of it, or we can invite you to it if you haven't seen it yet?
Aware, and I will join shortly.
It's on the Kubernetes Slack group, and the channel is called WG-Cloud Provider.
And Travis, I think there is a vSphere provider and a Fusion provider in the repository today. Are you the right person for both of those, or is one of them?
I should probably turn on my video just to say hello. You know, I don't know who the contact is for Fusion at this point. Okay. So no, and I claim no ownership over the vSphere one today.
Okay.
So we're in kind of a exploratory phase from the group that I'm in, which is Cloud Native Apps.
Okay.
So mostly for my own education at this point, but I will be getting more involved shortly.
Great. Thanks.
Yep. And I think if David wants to say anything, I think, and also another guy from our group, Anferney, might be on. But I think all kind of the same story.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I think that concludes our meeting, unless someone else wants to bring something up. Okay. Thank you all for joining us today. Let's meet again next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.